Welcome, everyone. It is a delight to have you joining us today for this session. And Marina, if you would go ahead and share the slides for us, that would be great as well. So as we're joining, hopefully you've been able to add to the chat. We would love to see who's here. Looks like Miami-Dade College is in the house. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's session is on innovation and leadership for change-making institutions. Before we get started, we're going to introduce the session more fully in a minute, but a key focus of what we're really going to be doing is equipping each of us as innovative leaders to advance change-making across our institutional systems. Before we embark on any kind of systems level change, with the hope of increasing agency, justice, and equity, it's really critical to understand our current systems, their context, as well as their rich histories. And so I'd like to recognize that Ashoka U, the conference organizer, is located on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Notchkatanga Nation, which then became a part of the Piscataway Nation. I'd like to invite you to just pause for a moment and recognize the land, the first peoples, and the histories of your own context. As we do so, I'd encourage us to really reflect on how those histories inform our current systems, what changes still need to be made, and what kind of change leaders we want to be to help create that kind of a future for others. As we enter this space, I do invite us to remember the Ashoka Exchange values of respect, generosity, and inclusion. We are looking forward to an interactive session today. We've got a couple of breakout groups, and so look forward to getting to interact with one of you today. As we jump into the session, Marina, if you can advance the slide for us to slide 5. I'm going to do just a brief introduction to myself, to our session, and also to our guest speakers, because we have a couple spotlight speakers here today as well. So my name is Angie Fiesel. I am an independent consultant currently. I am the formerly director of Changemaker Campus with Ashoka U. And also one of the lead authors of Ashoka U's most recent publication, Becoming a Changemaker Institution. And Marina, if you would get us to the next slide as well, that'd be great. And just a brief introduction for those of you who may not be as familiar with Ashoka U. Its big, hairy, audacious vision for of over a decade and a half has really been to advance change making, not just as an educational pathway, but really as a way of being across all of higher education, and embedding it into institutions themselves. And so the guidebook most recently published really culls from and synthesizes some of the key lessons and insights that we have learned from across hundreds of institutions and thousands of stakeholders on both how to embed change making into educational practices, but also how to lead and innovate to embed it across the institution. So today we're going to be drawing from a few of the principles and frameworks, especially in the leadership chapter, to really focus on individual institutional innovation and how individuals can lead across the university to spread change making. If you would advance the slide for us, Marina. Tomorrow's session, we have a session tomorrow as well. So if folks are interested in coming back and learning more about kind of the educational angle, we'd love to visit with you about changemaker education. But again, today it's really about how does an individual help foster a changemaker institution and spread changemaking. Before we dive into the individual attributes and skills, it behooves us to kind of think about what is the desired end state? What is the kind of idea of taking change making and becoming a change maker institution? And as we see here, it really is about embedding change making into the institutional DNA of the institution itself. And that means not just embedding it in courses, it also means embedding it in the strategies and operations. And when that happens, you see bold action being taken. You see it not just in one course, as Marina talked about in her keynote, but you see it across programs and gen ed requirements. You see that faculty, staff, students, diverse community voices are all engaged and respected, and their opinions are valued, and they come together to help solve problems. And then finally, that the institution is really committing its resources to to produce positive social impact that is in and with and together with the community and others through mutually beneficial partnerships. The whole goal is obviously to produce and to foster changemaker graduates and thriving communities at the same time. I don't think this topic could be more timely given what we've been through in the last year and a half, the amount of adaptability and change that's been required. And so we're assuming that if you're coming today that you're embracing the need for that kind of adaptability, that kind of a change-making ethos and spirit, that you're already embedding some kind of change making within your classes, your courses, your institution, and are interested to learn how to kind of innovate and advance to spread that more fully. So that's what we're going to dive into today. With that, Marina, if you would advance us to the next slide. Super. And we are going to be joined by a couple of speakers. I'm delighted to have Ray Irwin, hopefully is going to be joining us. Marina, is he with us yet?
Yes, he is.
He is. Wonderful.
I'm here, Angie. Nice to see you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. I'm sorry for the technical kinks and good to see you. Sorry. Fabulous. I'm going to turn it over. Ray Irwin from the University of Northampton, patching through with some technical difficulties today, and also Carrie Wise. Ray, would you just introduce a little bit about yourself and your current role at University of Northampton?
Hi, everybody, and thanks for the introduction, Angie. Sorry for all the lateness. Yeah, my name's Ray Irwin. In my current role, I'm Director for Enterprise and Employability at the University of Northampton. It's been a bit of a journey to get to this sort of position. I worked in the social enterprise sector in the UK from the early 2000s through to probably only a few years ago, really, working particularly in the co-op sector. I was a social entrepreneur in residence at the University of Northampton, which is where my change-making career sort of took off. And I've been the change leader at Northampton for about 8 years now, Angie, I think it is. So yeah, I didn't have any grey hair when I started, but now I'm a sort of hardened change leader within higher education. So thank you for having me today.
Great to have you. And also Carrie Wise, if you would, love to have you introduce yourself.
Hi there, Carrie Wise here. Welcome everybody, and thank you so much for this opportunity, Angie and Marina. I am the Chief Strategic Officer for the Martini Education and Opportunity Trust. We abbreviate that as MEOT, M-E-O-T. And I was the change leader at Fordham University, where I founded a collaboratory, which was primarily co-curricular, but working closely with faculty. And from that, I joined one of our primary funders, Fordham alum Brent Martini, to run this trust opportunity for change leaders and others. And we'll get into more about, how we look for those leaders and what kinds of opportunities really seize us and our imagination.
Wonderful. It is such a delight to have Ray and Carrie here with us today. Really seasoned social innovators and folks that have both lived and breathed being an institutional innovator, but also really consulted quite widely across institutions. So you're going to be hearing more from them shortly. But before we dive into some of their stories and their principles, love to get a chance to get to know who's in the room. So we're going to do a quick warm-up exercise. We're going to use the chat function. So if you would try to get to the chat function if you haven't gotten your there yet. Marina, if you would advance a slide for us, please. I think down 2 slides, one more. We are going to do kind of an adapted Mad Tea Party exercise. And so how this is going to work is I'm going to give a prompt. It could be, for example, my name is, and then I'm going to ask you to type into the chat function your response, but don't hit enter quite yet. Wait for about 20 seconds. I'm going to give you a signal, enter, and then we'll all enter our responses at once. And that gives us each a little bit of time to kind of come up with our own answers before we get to view and see responses from others. So this is a chance to hear from all of you. And with that, the first prompt is going to be, my primary role in my college or university is. My primary role in my college or university is. Again, type that in, don't hit enter yet. And post. Professor, building capacity for social enterprise, fabulous. Help us thinking differently about how to solve problems. Other responses? I know we've got a few more folks on the line teaching and researching. Great. So we've got some faculty well represented here. Retired but staying active. Professor and director of campus support services. Wonderful. So some great variety of roles and perspectives. A student, fabulous. Wonderful to have a student on the line. And we're going to be talking about the importance of student leadership as well. And student leaders absolutely serve as institutional innovators. All right, the next prompt is going to be, I was drawn to this topic because. I was drawn to this topic because. And feel free, if you're ready, to go ahead and start posting. All right, we've got interested in institutional and systems level change. Man, this is the session for you. Leadership and innovation. Let's see, it's a campus co-chair. I want to know how I can help my campus move forward and expand change. Fabulous, Evelyn. Laura Murphy, it's great to see you. And we're going to be calling you on the spot with a comment like that. An institutional innovator herself from Tulane. Good leadership is essential for success, and I want to improve the quality of life for all. Fabulous. Thanks for letting us know a little bit about what's motivating you. So next we're going to go to, this last year has shown that we need leaders who. This last year has shown that we need leaders who. All right, feel free to go ahead and post. Authentic, vulnerable, trust, tell us truth, patient, resilient, and forward thinking. Hands down, transform and motivate students. Another, authenticity, aren't afraid to try. So courage, great. We're gonna hit on some of those for sure today. Next one. If changemaking were the norm on campuses, we could. If changemaking were the norm, we could. Go ahead and post. Change the world. Feel human every day while addressing complex issues for justice. Get a better world. Do anything. Man, I love the values of optimism from the exchange being lived out right here. I love it. And we'll do one more. Change leadership. A change leadership superpower I'd like is. A change-making leadership superpower I'd like is. And Ken, thanks for that. I love the nurture ourselves comment. Go ahead and post if you're ready. Evelyn, thanks for that. I love that, having faculty identify as change makers. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit more in a session tomorrow morning if anyone's interested to join. And innovative leadership today, really being able to help motivate that kind of a spirit across the campus. Give a meaningful life, more safety for risk taking, forget all the irritating struggles of bureaucracy and keep moving. I think that's speaking to a lot of the resilience that we were seeing earlier. Ability to understand others' perspectives. So cultivating a deep empathy, allow everyone to discover their passion and purpose. These are beautiful and I think really hit to the spirit of what changemaking is all about. why we aspire to bring that to bear in our institutions and what we hope to accomplish through it. Thank you all for taking a few minutes just to kind of share that as we get kicking off and set the context for what kind of leadership is required to innovate and to accelerate change making more prolifically across our campus. So with that, Marina, if you would go ahead and advance us to one more slide from there into them. Before we jump into kind of a case context, we're going to turn to Ray here shortly to help illuminate pardon me, one case study. But before we do, I think it's really important to kind of acknowledge that leadership manifests not as a single role, not as a single individual. Just as in social entrepreneurship, we are moving away from and we want to deny any sense of heropreneurship. There's no one single individual, but social innovation and change making happen when many diverse perspectives come together to solve problems in collaboration. So is the same things true for if we're trying to fundamentally rewire our systems on campus. And so absolutely, the traditional role of a senior administrative leader has an important and critical role. They hold positions of authority and decision-making, and we want to see that senior leaders are embedding change-making into strategy, that they are embedding it into academic plans, that they are modeling the kind of leadership and setting a culture and a tone for the organization. So there's absolutely a role that's critical for senior administrators and leaders. We're not going to take a deep dive into that today, but we will acknowledge and talk about some of the characteristics and traits, and especially a few that we've seen already about courage and commitment will come up and resonate really strongly there. We've also seen the kind of comment about really having faculty embrace a change maker identity. And that's exactly right, that we need educators who are going to embed change making in educational programs and across curricular and co-curricular experiences. But first and foremost, they have to embrace that identity themselves. But we see that changemaker educators are powerful, not only to influence the classroom, but also to influence really all of the academics and all of the co-curriculars. Student leaders, and we're so thankful to have a student, at least one, if not more students on the call today, are critical. As the keynote was talking about yesterday, and the students were kind of calling for more co-leadership, inviting students into the conversation to define the future of higher education. And so students have an opportunity to collaborate with leaders and educators to envision and shape the institution, and to be co-leading and co-teaching classes and to be mentoring students. And so they play a vital role. We're going to be zooming in on the one that you see here on the top of institutional innovators. And they can hold any different type of job description or role. It could be a senior faculty member. It could be a senior staff member. It could be a student leader that it's emerging. It, could be a vice president or vice chancellor of student affairs. So the role is less specific or important, the job description, but it's really kind of stepping into a desire to innovate and to advance change making. And these individuals really collaborate with senior leaders to get senior leadership engagement and resources. They collaborate with students and build teams of educators to really kind of create a collaborative effort to be advancing change-making strategy and practice. So it takes a whole village, it takes an entire community to really come together to advance change making. We're going to zoom into one case study now and hear from Ray at the University of Northampton. And I'm going to ask Ray, Marina, if you would advance the next slide. The kind of key thing we'd love to hear from you, Ray, is really just more generally, what is your story of becoming an institutional innovator in higher education? And specifically, as you kind of tease it out, to help us understand your role individually as an institutional innovator, but your role in context of University of Northampton becoming a changemaker institution and engaging with a change team and senior leadership. So we'd love to hear kind of a 5-minute case study or so from you, if you would.
Thanks, Angie. And the way you position that, it makes me sort of feel a bit like one of those heropreneurs that we say we're not going to be, really. My story is, as somebody said the other day, it was that person, or is that person, who was off radar. I came into higher education having worked in the social enterprise space for quite a long time, with a huge chip on my shoulder and a sense of really not necessarily feeling that wherever I was that I potentially fitted. And I went into higher ed purely to do a master's program, and the university offered me a job while I was doing it. And I was this guy who was, as my old boss used to say, I don't understand half the things you say or half the things you do, but can you do a bit more of it and say a bit more about it, please? And what that was sort of meant was that I think as a change maker, and I didn't associate myself as such back then, I saw the sort of world slightly different in higher ed than maybe some of my colleagues. The sort of things that they saw as barriers, I saw as challenges. And there was a group of us that would meet up over coffee and talk about the things that if we could change at the university, we would like to, and what we felt that higher education had to offer to help not just change the world, but to provide students with a different experience to take on some of those challenges. And I think the real pivot point came for me when we had a change in senior leadership. And we had a new vice chancellor or president come in who wanted to do things differently themselves, but to a certain extent didn't really know the questions to ask, just knew that things needed to be done slightly different. And I think that was sort of like the second learning, was that when you look up at senior leaders, they don't always have the answers, because they don't always know the questions to ask. So when we were able to get into those sorts of conversations, winning over senior leadership by being able to articulate the staff, the student experience, the things that we wanted to innovate, and how we could do more of this innovation with that support, reaching up to get that support. We were really lucky, or I was really lucky, in that this new individual decided that actually this was a capability and was something around the University of Northampton that was a real strength. We had staff and students who were articulating very similar stories, and it enabled us to sort of surface what was in the DNA, really. I was lucky in that I was then appointed the social entrepreneur in residence at the university, and that enabled me to work across the entire institution. There was one line in my job description that gave me permission to enter any meeting I wished to go into and cause trouble. Now that was real permission, and real not authority as such, because that worked against me in certain respects, because we all know how staid certain colleagues can be within higher ed, whether it's faculty or whether it's in staff. But what it gave me was a real profile with the students. And just picking up Angie's points, students are the biggest power base for a university, I believe, and creating an environment for them in which they can identify what difference they want to make in the world, and for you to be that facilitator, you being the person who can connect dots and connect people up in a way that senior leaders don't see, to enable other people and students to be the change maker that they want to be, to make the difference they want, to almost legitimize their feelings and their actions around this space. And I think that was the point 3 for me, is that actually, as an individual who was now at a middle manager level, it's not down to me to do everything. Actually, people would come to me to legitimize the things that they wanted, to get permission from me, because actually within the institution, change making was something that people got recognized for. But actually the change happened somewhere else, that actually connecting them to other people and opening up those resources, mobilizing other areas of the institution, that's what my role became. And somebody asked me once whether I minded about other people getting credit for things that were happening when I'd been involved. Not at all. Being a change maker makes you realize that you can do your little bit, but you can't do the whole lot. You have to enthuse the entire campus to be able to pick that up. Where I'm at now in senior management, it's like I'm a child in a sweet shop, really. I now have the ability to really, from top down, put that infrastructure in place. I have been lucky. but I've also made a lot of those opportunities. And I have to say, being involved with change leaders like Carrie and others, and Ashoka, you really empowered me, really, because I was in a community then of people who didn't fit, didn't belong, thought differently, saw the world differently, and were speaking my language. They were my tribe to a certain extent, just as you guys who've attended this session today may pick up on some of those bits. Connecting to other people and connecting staff, student and faculty to your tribe is a great way of unleashing that innovation. I think I've probably had more than my 5 minutes, Angie. I hope that was useful, but happy to take any observations.
No, absolutely. That's great, Ray. The only thing I'd love if you would tease out just a little bit more for anyone who may not be familiar with the University of Northampton. What are a couple of the key outcomes? Like, what does change making look like at Northampton, so that they can kind of see like what a change maker institution, what is that innovation led to?
Yeah, thanks, Angie. And I take it for granted, really, because I do live in a change-making environment, and it's been a long journey for us, 7, 8 years, maybe longer, 10, 15, some would say 800 years to get where we are. Change-making at Northampton happens on every corner, in every classroom, in every meeting these days, in every engagement with students. And I think the thing that I'm most proud of, even though my involvement was minor, was that with first, I believe, and I always put this out there, the first institution, higher education institution that have embedded Changemaker into every single subject and every single program. Every one of our students is opened up to the opportunities of changemaking through their curriculum. And that came to fruition following a conversation I had with our head of curriculum development at the exchange on a freezing cold bus as we drove around Washington during one exchange, where they were struggling to understand how they could be a change maker. And they opened up by saying, actually, I'd like to do this within the curriculum. 5 years later, we had co-produced with all staff and students a whole new curriculum covering everything from psychology to midwifery, business through to game design, and have embedded changemaker principles, human-centered design, an understanding of how that subject contributes to not only the solutions to some of the issues faced in the world, but has been the cause of some of those. So rather than changemaking be that office that I used to sit in as this mad person who talked some sort of language that nobody understood, now we have a prominent place in a brand new building that was, our whole campus was designed to facilitate change making. And actually that's a really proud place to be, because within our new strategic plan, Changemaker is one of only 3 key drivers, and everything we do has to show how it contributes to social innovation and change making, and enabling the University of Northampton to be a world leader in this space.
Amazing. Thanks, Ray. And I know for some that they may be familiar with that story. For others, that may just be kind of blow our minds to think that, oh my gosh, how has change making actually been embedded across the curriculum? How has the design and the physical space been designed to foster collaboration? And so thanks for painting a picture of what could be. We also appreciate that that's not the starting point, and people don't get there immediately, and it doesn't become that pervasive in every context. And so that's not the expectation, but it is inspiring to see what has been done in one context. And also really appreciate you, Ray, kind of unwrapping and showing your role individually, but your role as teams. And what I really loved how you said, I'm going to use my own word. I almost feel like you have facilitated or unleashed the voice of the student, the power of other individuals. So you rightly said, you're not the hero. It's not one individual who's done anything. It's someone who's kind of caught a language. I love how you shared as well early on, like there's a core group of you that kind of came together. This wasn't a formalized top-down thing at first. There was some like-minded people with some shared values, and you guys were coming together in community. And then together with senior leadership support, then there was a little bit more maybe resource mobilization and more formalization that could come to bear. But then even though, and while that's, again, not everyone will have this opportunity to have it fully embedded in a job description, though of course that is the ideal that we aspire to, even with that, you weren't necessarily calling all of those shots. You were enabling and empowering people who had a vision and an idea. So just really appreciate how you've illuminated the kind of the dynamic ways that many different people have created that container.
And I just add one little thing on there, Angie, just to clarify. It is the power of the micro. It's the power of a conversation over a coffee, an introduction of two people. It's those small little things that accumulate into really big changes that can happen as part of a marathon rather than a sprint.
Yeah, wonderful. And we're going to tease out some of the attributes that kind of contribute to those kind of outcomes as we look at the leadership attributes. Before we do so, Marina, if you would just advance the slide for me, and you can skip past this one to the next slide. And I just wanted to kind of recap. We won't go into detail on these next two slides, but you can download the slides from the app, the Attendify app, if you want to look at these in more detail. This just kind of summarizes what you heard really actually Ray was doing in a kind of position of institutional innovation, of coordinating with others, bringing together a team across the institution to really think about how could they advance change making? What might that look like? And so assessing kind of the programming, identifying gaps, and really promoting new pathways across the institution. And again, that doesn't always start from a formalized position or a position of designated power. It can happen pretty organically. In other contexts, it does happen initially very formally. So there's lots of different pathways and ways that institutions kind of evolve and innovate over time. Marina, if you would go ahead as well and advance us to then 2 more slides down, we'll skip the next one and go straight to Carrie. I would love to now turn it over to Carrie. We've heard from one kind of institutional context and individual context. Help us step back a little bit and kind of pan back a little bit to, from your experience consulting and engaging with lots of different social innovation and change-making activities, what are some of those key principles and tools that you're seeing really are necessary for leading institutional innovation and change?
Thanks so much, Angie. So I'm going to go a little bit more into the capacities of leaders and leadership and some of the principles. So I think one of the main thing that stands in the way of change making can be a leadership style, and it's a leadership style that we're familiar with. And it sort of looks like rigidity and dependence on a single leader, like a command and control environment, where the problems are well known and the solutions are well known. And I think, and I picked up something yesterday from Akhtar Badshah from the University of Washington in a session that he was in. He gave me a great perspective. He said, we had the agricultural economy, the industrial economy, the digital economy, and now the purpose economy. And so if the agricultural and industrial economies needed this kind of command and control output that could be measured, now the digital economy, and if you were to accept his premise that we're in the purpose economy, really require something completely different, which is a priority given to effectiveness and success and outcomes, and in creativity and creating new and novel products or solutions, and being responsive, and not efficiency and counting widgets being produced. But so much of the leadership that we have has been formed around those older principles, and now we're seeing this big shift. And as we see the shift, Babson College in particular drew my attention many years ago through a book they have on social entrepreneurship to prediction logic and creation logic. And I think these are mindsets, or actually tools, that leaders and others, everybody uses and can flip back and forth. So what do I mean? So prediction logic is where you study data and concepts that apply to what has happened in the past. So you can predict what is going to happen. And we have a lot of students in many, many classrooms that are dedicated to prediction logic. What is the history? What are the cases? Teaching them what has come before so that they are really knowledgeable and can apply that knowledge to new situations. But if the thing that happens has never happened before, the storms have never occurred, the changes in markets have never happened, the pandemic that we're in now hasn't been here in 100 years, so none really in our lifetimes. You need something else, which is creation logic. And that's where a lot of change making happens. So creation logic looks to me like someone who is willing to try something, learn from that attempt, learn from that iterative step, take the feedback, and based on that in the moment feedback, try something else. or pivot from it slightly in a different direction. So it's a constant throwing things up on the wall, see what sticks, see what works, taking the feedback. So you're generating your own data in the moment, and you're reading your own data in the moment. So if you think that you need to create change in a thing, you try something, and if that doesn't work, you try something else, and then you keep generating your own experience around it. So the ability to flip between prediction logic, which is essential, and creation logic, which is also essential, and knowing when to go back and forth between the two, is a really key change maker attribute that I think is sort of at the heart of it. And I'll end by saying that the Martini Education and Opportunity Trust that I'm now part of, where I can be implementing change on a systems level beyond one university, we tend to fund proof of concept for people who have that right stuff in leadership, where they understand that diverse voices need to be at the same table in order to know what's really going on, and to have new ideas and fresh ideas coming from all different corners. And their leadership style is one where they create a positive environment in which other people can do their job, and bring them things that are way beyond anything the one leader would know how to do, because it's not really about the limitations of the leader any longer. So we love to look for proof of concept in people that are living in these kind of this change-making capacity world. So I will leave it there.
Thanks, Carrie. I really appreciate that. And I think you've especially leaned into the innovation side of institutional leadership here and change making, and that is not in a predictive, we can't control and foresee the whole future. So what is the experimental approach, and what data do we need to learn and grow and adapt and respond to? So really appreciate that. That helps provide, I think, some good kind of background context as we kind of go into an activity now. We want to invite you all in this activity to give some thought to kind of your own context. You've been inspired by one case study, you've been thinking about kind of general principles of innovation, and we'd love for you to spend a couple of minutes together in a breakout group. And Marina, if you could advance a slide for us. Your breakout question is going to be, what's a specific program or change that you would like to innovate to advance change making across the institution? So again, assuming that you're an advocate of change making and you're interested to see that somehow grow, what's something that you would like to innovate or to kind of create or change that might spread that on your campus or otherwise in your sphere of influence? So we're going to give you some time in groups, probably about 10 minutes, I think. And I'm just forming some breakout groups now. Give me one more minute. If you want to start thinking about that individually and kind of maybe even taking some notes, feel free. And we're going to go to the room here in just a moment. All right, here we go. All right, it looks like we have everyone back. I hope that you were able to have some good conversations and at least start kind of dreaming or imagining, even if maybe something wasn't top of mind for you, maybe you got a chance to learn or be inspired by one of your partners. Great to have you back. Love, if anyone is interested to share by chat, would love, even if it's kind of one phrase, something that you're interested in innovating. Love to hear what was the theme of your conversation. Is it embedding change making further into your classroom, across some programs? Is anyone ready to tackle gen ed requirements? And thanks for that comment as well, Ken, about creation logic. Appreciate that. Well, let's move forward. And so we've got some ideas in mind of potential opportunities on campus to further spread change making. Marina, if you would advance the next slide for us. And I think one more down. We'll really start to dive in now and reflect upon the key qualities and kind of attributes of an institutional innovator. And so again, this is really drawing from the most recent Ashoka U publication, Becoming a Changemaker Institution, that was referenced earlier, and is really a synthesis of what Ashoka U has learned over the last 10 or 12 years from its vast array of stakeholders, again, thousands of individuals, hundreds of institutions around the globe, really synthesized here into what are the mindsets, kind of the knowledge and the skills. And you see here, and I think it was talked about earlier, an identity. And so you see here at the left, identify as an institutional innovator. And we found that institutional innovators see that the potential, the great potential of higher education, and feel called to speak into and responsible to kind of foster change making, to foster an environment and an educational process in which all are invited to contribute their ideas and be agents of change for common good. And so there's kind of a motivation and a desire, a passion, or a sense of responsibility that kind of goes above and beyond the typical job description. There's a solutions mindset. I think we heard that illuminated in Ray's story of seeing things a little differently, not seeing a barrier, but seeing an opportunity, and having kind of a mindset that strips past the symptoms and wants to get to the root and wants to really understand what are potential solutions, and is kind of optimistically and persistently addressing challenges or opportunities. From a knowledge side, it never hurts to have a little bit of understanding of social innovation and social entrepreneurship or change-making processes and practices. Doesn't mean that every institutional innovator is therefore an expert, but they have a working knowledge of some of the ideas that have already been raised about not being predictive, about experimentation, about adaptation, and understanding some of those innovation processes. And they know how to apply it to higher education. So it's not this standalone concept that sits in a class of social entrepreneurship in the business school that's really about creating a venture. It's really a mindset and a skill set that is applied to creating institutional change on campus itself. And they bring that skill to bear, or that knowledge to bear. The other knowledge area is really not only an understanding of what are social systems and what is systems thinking, but then really cultivating and applying that within one's context, and an ability to deeply understand one's institution, an ability to kind of see the formal and informal power structures, the things that are potential influencers or levers, and really recognizing opportunities to get others involved and recognizing what could be levers of potential change. And then on the skills side, on the right, you'll see leading systems change. And we've got, you see there, co-creating with other people, visions and strategies, right? And really building a sense of enthusiasm. I have loved to see this across all of our change leaders. I see this especially also in Carrie, of an ability to kind of call people into a conversation and illuminate the right work that they're already doing. And it's not really about asking people to change, it's more acknowledging the amazing work that they're doing and inviting them into and empowering them into a conversation about furthering the great change-making work that's already happening on campus. And so there's a collaborative spirit there and an enthusiasm there. Marina, if you'll go to the next slide, I'll just summarize those, and then I'm going to invite Ray and Carrie to kind of speak into their experiences, what they might underscore a little bit of some of these as well. But each of those mindsets, knowledge, and skills could actually kind of be summarized conveniently in 4 kind of key qualities, right? So conveniently, the 4 Ps. There's passion. You've heard that in Ray's voice when he was talking about early days, nothing was formalized, but it was a recognition, his sense of purpose, his sense of why. But it wasn't just Ray, it was a community of people with shared ideas and values and imaginations of what higher education could be and could look like. So there's a deep commitment and a passion and purpose. There's also a deep ability to perceive. And so we see that through, again, the systems thinking of perceiving possibilities, of perceiving ways to influence the system. There's a deep persuasion as well, and that goes to that leading systems change, an ability to build authentic and trusted relationships. So this is not necessarily a hard-nosed negotiation sales person. This is someone who builds trusted relationships and authentic relationships and is able to bring together individuals and through a spirit of humility lifts up other people's work. And is able to invite a movement or a group of people to really shine in collaboration together. And then the final one is perseverance. This is not an easy thing to do, lest it would have already been done. So this is really having a sense of when is the right time to push forward, sensing the energy of what's going on in the institution and having a good feeling for an ability to persevere to say, here's a short-term gain and we need to push forward, or wait, we need to hold off. This is going to take some time and let's just keep chugging. Let's make some small wins here or there. And so there's a perseverance. But I would also say, and I want to kind of underscore that there's an ability to set personal boundaries for resilience and sustainability. Because this is long and this is difficult, change leaders or institutional innovators also need to kind of set those personal boundaries and understand to play the long game. What is the resilience and sustainability that they need for themselves individually, and to make that a priority? Ray, Carrie, I'd love to kind of invite you in if anything specifically resonated that you want to underscore, or if there's things that you want to add there.
Carrie, did you want to go first?
I was just going to ask you the same question.
I went first last time. I'll hand over to you first.
Okay. It's just, this is a great summary and presentation of what it takes, what the qualities are. And I'm reflecting on the conversation I just had with two institutions, Tulane and Miami-Dade, and how there's an acknowledgement that there's a lot going on, particularly at Miami-Dade, and maybe the perception that change making is something new and different and it's a new theme, but that if that perception can be altered to acknowledge that it's what's already happening, but it hasn't been put in this light, then the change making will be very rapid, because it's not about reframing and saying you've got to do something new on top of everything you're already doing. So I think I took away some really good thoughts from Evelyn on that. And then the perseverance part comes from some of these larger, well, nothing's larger than Miami-Dade, but some of the, I would say, the sort of other, there is a different kind of university that does not have so many campuses, is not dealing with the same kind of population as Miami-Dade. And so in those settings, and that's where we were talking a little bit about Tulane, and what I heard from Tulane is exactly what I had at Fordham. There's this perseverance, and what you just said, Angie, about the long game of change and understanding where the institution is at right now and finding the little victories and moving strategically, step by step, very slowly, and building those authentic relationships and bridges. It's just so key. When everyone has been doing it the same way for 150 years. In the case of Fordham, I think it's 180 years.
Yeah.
And Jesuits, like we have the whole Catholic order thing on top of that. So it's just, I think you got it all here. Go ahead. Anything you want to put into it?
I'd just add to that. I totally agree with everything you said there, Carrie. But and this slide for me, every time I see this slide and in the handbook, it really speaks to me, because it sort of does encapsulate in a very simple way a lot of experience. And the one that I would just sort of focus on is that perseverance piece again, because we are a passionate bunch, because we want change, because we want to win people round to and persuade them of our view in the world. We sometimes forget about ourselves, and being, really knowing when to stop banging your head against the wall, just win the fights you can in that moment, and focus on you, making sure that you're well, that you are looking after yourself, because the change will only happen if you can see it through and be with it all the way through. And that point you made, Angie, and I said, it is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and it is those small wins. So stick at it, keep well, and just take those small wins as you go as big achievements.
Great. Thanks for that. And one final thing before we go to another break, Marina, if you would just advance that slide for us. I'm glad that one resonated. I did want to acknowledge, we mentioned this at the top. Of course, senior leaders play a critical role in this. While we're not taking a deep dive on them, I do want to acknowledge some of the attributes that you all raised earlier in our time together really come to play and to bear for institutional innovators, and even especially so for senior leaders. And so just wanted to acknowledge that for senior leaders, presidents, provosts, trustees, deans, vice presidents, there's commitment that has got to be a part of this, that there's an unwavering support, and they're in a position to both advocate through their words and their speeches and their public discourse, but also through the resource, also through providing, opening doors and helping folks overcome challenges and being committed for the long term, as we were just building on the theme that systems change is a long-term game. And so there's an unwavering support that manifests in a lot of different ways. Courage, I think that was raised in the very top of the call. And this is courage to join conversations, to challenge others to think differently, to manage natural tensions that emerge when we are leading in difficult times on difficult issues. Collaboration, and so that's, of course, collaboration is going to show up for anyone in change. How it manifests maybe uniquely for a senior leader here is that it has to be modeled. It has to be something that they are doing that is reflected in their decision-making structures and in their behaviors. And that there are structures that are built in for cross-functional teams and for creating fluid teams of teams when needed. And that decision-making can be consultative when appropriate. And so finally, that leads us to coherence. And that is, senior leaders play an important role in terms of sense making and sense giving, and really helping the institution understand and navigate challenge and adaptivity, while at the same time giving sense to the institution of creating the kind of structures and the processes that will be required for living more abundantly in a change-making environment. And so I wanted to kind of acknowledge that senior leadership aspect as well. So let's advance this on, Marina. And that's going to bring us to kind of a final reflection activity and breakout activity, where we'd love for you to kind of think about, you first reflected on what's something that you might want to be innovating or advancing across your campus. You're already doing some change making. What's that next level of ambition to be helping others embrace change making more? As you're thinking of that context, the question is, what skills, resources, or influence are needed? So I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakouts and allow you to kind of reflect upon that. Let's see. I'm just going to form the breakout real quickly. And
if it helps for numbers, feel free to throw me in as well.
Okay, I think we should be set. And we'll go ahead and see you in about 7 minutes. All right, welcome back, everyone. I think that we've got you all back. I hope that you had some nice discussions in your groups as we are just closing out. I hope that gave you an opportunity to kind of think about the kind of theoretical idea or the innovation or the change that you might want to advance, and really kind of think through a little bit some of the skills and resources or the influence that might be needed. And that could be really good food for thought going forward. I'd love if is there anyone that feels compelled to share a key theme or what key insight that may have emerged? Feel free to share either verbally or through the chat as we're starting to close out. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Marina, if you would have just advanced us to the last slide. Again, a lot of these ideas and frameworks are in the Becoming a Changemaker Institution by Ashoka Yu, and you can learn more about it on an info page on the website. There's also a downloadable executive summary that's for free if you want to catch some of the main principles and ideas there, or purchase your own copy. You can get the full guidebook itself. Again, if you want to dive into more of the attributes and the skills of a changemaker educator, we're going to be having a session tomorrow morning and would welcome any of you there as well. Have a wonderful exchange experience and thank you very much. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Ray, for your experiences, and thank you all for your participation. Bye.
Thanks, Angie. Bye all.
Bye, everybody.